Hello, our favorite human. Welcome to Bronx Tales with your host, Bronxy B, and me. I'm Logan. Thank you for being here. People often wonder why we continue to talk about this case. They say he pled guilty. Why are you still talking about it? And the reason, for me at least, the reason I continue to talk about it is because the information we've been given is so inconsistent. And the things that continue to be put out on this case give us more questions than answers. I understand he pled guilty, but that doesn't mean that somebody is guilty in my book. There are, since 1989, 375 people that confess to a crime that they did not do, and 21 of those people spent many, many years, if not decades, on death row. 375 people is 375 too many. And that is just the people that confessed to a crime that they did not do and had been exonerated. That does not include the people who are still in jail or that have been exonerated and they stood there and remained innocent and remained professing their innocence. That doesn't include those people. The 375 is just the people who confess to a crime they didn't commit. There is hundreds and hundreds, if not maybe thousands, of people still in jail claiming they're innocent for crimes that they really didn't commit. The 375 is just the people that confessed to a crime they didn't do and were later exonerated. That's why I continue to dig into the information that we're given and continue to look into this case. And as I always say, Bryan Kohberger may have been the person that did it, but the problem comes with his rights being violated and the fact that the evidence we're given doesn't add up to it being him, let alone just one person. And that is why I'm still here and still digging. And we have a long road ahead of us, I think. I like to always remain transparent, especially the people that come to this channel and are a big part of this channel every day. They know that I like to be super transparent. I let them know what I'm digging into, what I'm looking into, because I think all of our brains put together is way better than just one. And I feel like we can get to answers better with all of us looking into it and not just one person. With that being said, I do want to remain transparent in every aspect of this channel. So I want to let you know that there was recently a person who shared my post. My post was in regards to me being angry about the toxicology report. And those of you who know me know I was not angry because they didn't have rugs in their system. And that is what this person twisted my words to say. And I just want to make it very clear. I was not angry because they didn't have rugs in their system. I was angry because we know that at least one person had been doing rugs, as there was a blue powdery substance on their desk with a rolled up bill next to it. And from what I know, I used to work in a rehab, and for what I know, people aren't going to get rugs, take them out of the baggie, put them on the desk, and put a rolled up bill next to it, and then walk away and not use them. They're also not going to lay them out if they're not using them, because that could make them damaged or lose them or whatever. You only lay them out when you have been using them and are going to use them again. I don't think anybody at 4 a.m. is going to start using them. I believe, in my opinion, it had been used throughout the night, and that was probably the last of it. It didn't say there was a baggie. It was just loose blue powdery substance with a rolled up bill. I am angry that they tell us and insinuate that somebody was using rugs that night and then give us a toxicology report that says there was no rugs in anybody's system, when their friends even tell us they were very into certain rugs, very specific substances. So what I was angry about is the continuation of being lied to, the inconsistencies. Everything that is released, there is something inconsistent about it, whether it's big or small. And that's what I'm angry about. On this channel, we've gotten through up to document number 157. Now, with that being said, that's quite a bit of documentation. And I have found so many things that are inconsistent, that don't add up with one another, that don't add up with what we've been told. And my other question is, I still haven't figured out how they even landed on Bryan Kohberger as the suspect. I haven't seen any documentation thus far that shows he had anything to do with this crime. Nothing has been a tip on him. There were only tips on him after he was arrested. I haven't heard of any sort of lead that would lead them to Bryan Kohberger. The only thing I've seen thus far is a document that stated they did a Google search and they were searching for the people that searched on the crime after it happened. And Bryan Kohberger was one of those people. And I could imagine there was hundreds and thousands, if not more than 100,000 people that searched that crime after it was committed. Bryan Kohberger was one of those people. He lives in the area and he had searched it 3 days after it happened. Let's not be confused. He did not search it prior to the crime happening or prior to the town knowing that it happened. He searched it 3 days after. I don't know how they would pick him out of the return of that warrant on Google, out of how many thousands of people were on that return for the people that Googled the crime. Now, in that warrant, it says they submitted a warrant to Google to figure out all of the people that searched the crime. He was one of them. And then a couple paragraphs down from that, it says, on December 19th, Bryan Kohberger became the main suspect, or whatever the verbiage is on there. And it's one small little sentence, and that's it. And then after that, their whole focus was on Bryan Kohberger. I still don't understand how they picked Bryan Kohberger out of all of those people on that warrant return for Google. I don't get it. And I have a problem with that. I've seen so many channels. I mean, it is ridiculous how many channels I have seen that are continuing to speak on Bryan Kohberger and give information as fact that is absolutely not true. I have seen over and over repeatedly that Bryan Kohberger was stalking them. I've even seen a channel that said Bryan Kohberger had been sitting outside their house 23 times. They don't know if he ever went inside the house. He may have, but that he was sitting directly outside their home 23 times. And that is absolutely not true. Even Bill Thompson said there was no stalking. We cannot put him at the house. We cannot put him in contact with any of the victims ever. There was no stalking. We also know in the documents that 16 of those 23 times that Bryan Kohberger pinged in Moscow, Idaho, he did not ping on the tower that did service 1122 King Road. He pinged on a tower that didn't service 1122 King Road. Matter of fact, the closest it got was over a football field away from 1122 King Road. And 16 of those 23 times he went to Target in Moscow. That is why he pinged there. It's very misleading. There's a lot of things that are misleading. And you have to dig and form your own opinion and be logical about it to understand what it's saying. It's not saying that he pinged at the house. It never once said that. Now, as I said, we've gotten through document 157 of the 314 documents that were released, and I've really realized a couple of different patterns. One of them being, it seems as if some of the reports are written much later than what they're reporting on happened. Let's say they're reporting on the crime itself, on what they saw on the 13th of November, and they will write a report on it 3 months later. I understand they're going off their body cameras, but you can't capture everything in a body camera. You can't remember everything that happened 3 months ago, especially when you're in an investigation. I find that a little bit strange, especially in the fact we saw a document where they wrote about something on the 16th, but the thing that they wrote about didn't happen until the 19th. So it seems to me that maybe some of these documents have been altered. Another pattern that I'm seeing is it seems as if the roommates, in my opinion, are not only distancing themselves from the crime, but they seem to be distancing themselves from each other as well. And I think that's a little strange. And another pattern that I'm seeing is tips coming in and leads coming in, and neither of them, none of them are followed up on. None of them. There was only one tip that I saw followed up on, and it was in regards to a rug dealer. And I feel like the only reason they followed up on that tip was because they knew the FBI was in town specifically for a rug ring takedown, and they probably wanted to be the hero in catching one. Other than that, there's no reason for them to even follow up on the tip that was given, as it didn't have anything to do with anything. And it really seems as if Bryan Kohberger has been found guilty in the public's eye, specifically on his behavior. I've recently seen a newly released body camera on Bryan Kohberger being pulled over late at night. It's a new one, and people are insinuating he's stalking and being creepy and that he is near 1122 King Road. We don't know any of that. We just know that it was dark and he's being pulled over. He was extremely honest when speaking with the officer. I don't know at what point someone's non-criminal behavior becomes factual evidence. It seems as if the public, or the guilters, I guess, are using Bryan Kohberger's mannerisms, or the time he drives around, or just simple everyday things. They're using that against him as some sort of factual evidence to find him guilty. And I haven't really seen that done before. And I find it appalling. I mean, what would they say if somewhere down the road he is exonerated, just like he said he would be? What happens then? In a recent interview with Bill Thompson, he made a statement that again changes the timeline. Surprise, surprise. He made a statement. Well, I'll just play it for you.
We don't know what may have changed his plans, if it did, inside the home, because we don't know who he intended to attack first. We do believe that Xana encountered him while she was still awake. She was up. She'd received a DoorDash order. That very likely could have put him into a panic, and panicked people make some mistakes.
What? So now he's saying Bryan Kohberger was inside the house at least 3:59 when the DoorDash order came. Xana got the DoorDash, and it spooked Bryan Kohberger while he was committing the crime, and that is why he unalived her. So now he's insinuating Bryan Kohberger was inside the house by 4 a.m.? Well, then that car, I guess, once again, can't be his, that is seen pulling in at 4:06, or whatever the dang time is. Now, in the same interview, Bill Thompson was asked why he didn't make Bryan Kohberger admit to something within the means of the plea deal. Why? It's a deal. Why didn't you make a deal that included Bryan Kohberger admitting to evidence, admitting to what he did? And this is what Bill Thompson had to say on that.
But it was our team's decision that getting the guilty pleas, straight up factual guilty pleas, was going to be the best legal way to approach this. I think that there were concerns that somebody like this particular defendant, if he was trying to allocute in a specific factual fashion, he could actually undermine the basis for his plea, and the judge would not have as solid of a foundation to uphold the plea. So we analyze this really from a pretty strict legal factual point of view. It's not to say that we don't understand and appreciate folks' desires to know what really happened, but I have no faith at all that Mr. Koberger would ever truthfully explain what happened or what he would say would make any sense. And I think that would even further victimize our families.
But why not challenge him on that? Why not see if you might get some honesty from him?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Peter. And we have considered that. And we decided that our best course on this case with this defendant in Idaho was to proceed as we did. I'm not going to say the decision was perfect. It certainly doesn't perfectly answer everybody's questions. I realize that. But I also accept that, as I said earlier from the beginning, we were advised by the profiling professionals that even if the person who committed these homicides tried to explain his reasoning and what occurred, that it wouldn't make sense to ordinary people, and that would further victimize these poor families. It was a judgment call. I accept it. It was a judgment call.
Now, what he's referring to is the fact that it would cause more pain on the families. Well, to my understanding, some of the families wanted that and begged for that and are still asking for that. But aside from that, why couldn't you ask him in private and let the people know, or let the families know? The only ones who want to know, let them know. Or better yet, why couldn't you just ask him in private to tell you where the weapon is? And then people know it for sure was him, because he's given us, and you've given us, nothing. I'm afraid that Bill Thompson knows that that question is a moot point, because Brian Koberger doesn't know what happened, and Brian Koberger doesn't know where the weapon is. And that is Bill Thompson's cover-up of why the question wasn't asked and why Brian Koberger wasn't made to tell us or anybody what happened or where the weapon is, because he knows Brian Koberger doesn't know. They went on to ask Bill Thompson what his closing statement would have looked like, and I perceive that it probably would have looked something like this.
The end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Koberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. Beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Koberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. We do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122. In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop on the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. Koberger's car. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Koberger's name, Brian Koberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area. It would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route, and they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. We don't know exactly what he did. The state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. Mr. Koberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Koberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. I can tell the court and the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office, and there was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized. They were spotless. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders. I will state for the record that there is no evidence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not completely heartless. I understand why Bill Thompson blocked the view of Dylan from Brian Koberger. But from everything we know, she said he made eye contact with her, that she looked him dead in his face, and he didn't have his eyes, eyebrows, or nose covered. She would have seen him. She said she saw him. However, when given her a picture of him, she could not match him to the perpetrator that she saw in her home. So why would you need to block the view of somebody that she couldn't even identify? And like I said, I'm not heartless. I get the whole point of it. But she could not match him to a picture of himself. She couldn't put him at the crime. Other things that I'm noticing lately is the evidence, especially the video evidence, seems to have altered times over and over again, whether it be seconds, 1 second, 11 seconds, or 35 minutes. I want to know who altered, who manipulated this video footage, and I want to know why. I think we all want to know why that is a huge problem. It just shows that somebody is trying to hide something, and the times that it's being altered or manipulated at are very crucial times in this case. And if nothing else, that should make you or a guilter raise a bushy eyebrow. And I do think we need to keep digging to find out more information, to try and put together as much as we can to figure out who did this. But I think more importantly, we need to be digging at a higher level. We need to figure out who is so important in that community, what elite wanted this crime covered up. Because I understand a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. I get that part. But when it got to a judge, if there was a judge that was not biased and wasn't a part of this, obviously, they would have said, you don't have any evidence. There's no way that we can try this. Nobody would find him guilty on what you have. However, they didn't say that. So we need to dig and find out who is so important that is pulling the strings in this case to make it go a certain way and to make it cover up and to make it then go away, just like the house. Now, if I wanted to talk about all the things that I found that were inconsistent and all the things that I found that are not adding up and are changing the timeline again or what have you in regards to the documents, I would be here literally for days. So I want to say, may we never forget the figure clad in black that was seen on video walking or running towards the crime scene at about 3:50 in the morning and then running back and jumping in their truck. and furthermore, finding red fluid within their apartment while they skipped town at 5 in the morning on November 13th. And then some way, somehow, the blood samples from that apartment were destroyed. And let's also not forget about the tip that was called in regards to a man whose name starts with a G, who got in an argument with Maddie and Xana at the Mad Greek, and then told his friend about it, and then said he followed them home. And then one night he broke in their house and stated to his friend, "I could have killed them all if I wanted to." Who also is an owner of many, many knives, including K-bars. Let's not forget about that tip that was never followed up on. There were hundreds and hundreds of items of evidence taken. And with this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of evidence, not one of them connected to Bryan Kohberger. The only thing that connected him was less than a secondary transfer amount of DNA on a knife sheath, and that is a removable object. I personally, in my opinion, don't think any jury would have found him guilty. I'm still waiting on him to file an appeal. I don't know what's going to happen next, but another pattern I've started to realize is they give us something to latch onto and dig into and talk about. And then as soon as that starts to die down, they'll give us something else. And then as soon as that starts to die down, they'll release something else. And then as soon as that starts to die down, there'll be an episode, a docuseries, a book, or something else. But they are the ones who continue to release stuff and continue to give us little bits at a time to keep us engaged in talking about this case. We need to ask ourselves, why? We can continue without them releasing other stuff. I mean, please do. We want to dig into it. But they're still controlling the narrative to this day. And we need to ask ourselves why. That's what I have for you today. I hope everybody has an amazing, amazing weekend. Do something nice for yourself today. Be kind, but more importantly, be kind to your dog. Bye, guys.